They're not angry because you disappeared. They're angry because you woke up and they lost access to you. Let me say this slowly because someone needs to hear it without flinching. When you chose distance, you didn't become cold. You became clearer. And clarity is terrifying to people who survived on your confusion. You didn't shout. You didn't insult. You didn't explain yourself 1,000 times like you used to. You simply stepped back, and suddenly they were furious. Why? Because distance exposes what tolerance used to hide. You see, people who benefit from your over-giving, your silence, your emotional labor, they don't call it love. They call it normal. And the moment you stop playing that role, the story breaks. Your distance didn't punish them. It revealed them. They're mad because you no longer chase closure. They're mad because you stopped negotiating your worth. They're mad because you realize that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And here's the hardest truth. Your clarity forced them to sit with themselves, and they didn't like what they saw. Distance isn't cruelty. Distance is what happens when self-respect finally speaks louder than fear. You didn't abandon anyone. You stopped abandoning yourself. And when someone loses control over you, they don't call it growth. They call it betrayal. But this is the beginning of your courage. They keep saying, you changed. And they're right, but not in the way they mean it. What changed is this: you stopped explaining yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. Your silence scares them because it used to be filled with emotional labor. You used to soothe, clarify, apologize, overextend, and smooth every sharp edge, especially the ones they created, and now there's space. And space is dangerous to people who rely on chaos. Your silence is no longer empty. It's intentional. It's the sound of someone who finally trusts themselves more than other people's reactions. They're mad because silence removes leverage. No reaction means no control. No access means no manipulation. You see, when you stop defending your boundaries, people are forced to face the truth. They weren't confused. They were comfortable. Your distance disrupts their narrative. They can't paint you as dramatic if you're calm. They can't provoke you if you refuse to engage. They can't guilt you if you no longer argue for your own worth. So they escalate. They accuse. They poke the wound, hoping you'll come back to the old version of yourself, the one who stayed explained and bled quietly. But silence, when chosen consciously, is not weakness. It's regulation. It's self-trust. It's the courage to say, I no longer need to be understood to be whole. They feel threatened because your quiet says something loud. You don't need their permission to protect your peace. And once that truth lands, there is no going back. Let me tell you something people don't like to admit out loud. Not everyone is upset because they miss you. Some are upset because they lost what they could take from you. Your distance didn't change your heart. It exposed the economy of the relationship. You were the listener, the fixer, the emotional cushion, the one who absorbed tension so others could stay comfortable. And when you stepped back, the imbalance became obvious. People who truly loved you asked, are you okay? People who benefited from you asked, why are you doing this to me? Do you hear the difference? Distance removes the disguise. It reveals who respected your boundaries and who resented them. They're mad because you stopped bleeding quietly. They're mad because you stopped turning self-betrayal into loyalty. They're mad because you realize that love without reciprocity isn't love. It's endurance. And endurance was never meant to be your identity. When you chose distance, you forced an audit. Who shows up without being needed? Who cares without consuming? Who stays when you stop performing? That clarity is devastating for people who relied on your exhaustion to feel powerful. You didn't become selfish. You became selective. And selective people are dangerous, not because they hurt others, but because they stop allowing themselves to be hurt. Your distance is not punishment, it's information. And the ones reacting the loudest, they're reacting to what they just lost access to. They say you're cold now, distant, unrecognizable. But let's be honest, what they're really saying is this: you're no longer convenient. Because the moment you put language around your limits, people who never respected them begin to panic. They call your boundaries walls. They call your self-respect ego. They call your healing abandonment. Why? Because boundaries expose entitlement. You didn't suddenly become harsh. You stopped cushioning the truth. For a long time, you confused guilt with kindness. You stayed because leaving felt cruel. You explained because silence felt selfish. You overgave because saying no felt like failure. But guilt is not proof of love. It's often the residue of being trained to prioritize other people's comfort over your own safety. When someone benefits from your lack of boundaries, your boundaries will feel like an attack. Read that again. They're not reacting to distance. They're reacting to accountability. Your clarity forces a mirror they never asked for. And instead of adjusting, they accuse. They say you've changed because it's easier than admitting they never adapted. They say you're heartless because it's safer than asking why you were hurting in the first place. But boundaries are not punishments. They are the distance at which you can love without disappearing. And if someone can only love you without limits, that's not love. That's consumption. You didn't become cruel, you became honest. And honesty has always made people uncomfortable. There will be a moment, quiet, late, and heavy, when you feel the pull to go back, to send the message, to soften the boundary, to explain one more time, hoping this time they'll finally understand. That urge isn't weakness, it's conditioning. You were taught that being misunderstood is dangerous. That someone's disappointment is your responsibility. That harmony matters more than honesty. So when distance creates discomfort, your nervous system panics. It whispers, fix it. Go back. Make it okay. But here's the truth that will save you. If clarity didn't work the first 10 times, repetition won't make it land. You don't owe people access just because they're upset. You don't owe closure to those who refused to listen when you were still speaking. Sometimes the most self-respecting thing you can do is resist the urge to perform your pain for understanding, because explaining often becomes a trap, a negotiation, a slow erosion of the boundary fought so hard to build. They may never agree with your choice. They may rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. They may wait for you to crack. Let them. Your job is not to be digestible. Your job is to be true. Distance feels uncomfortable because growth always disrupts old roles. But discomfort is not danger. You're not wrong for choosing peace over permission. And you don't have to go back to prove that. There's a quiet kind of power that shows up when you finally accept this. Not everyone will understand your decision. And that has to be okay. For a long time, you believed clarity required consensus, that if you could just explain it well enough, gently enough, long enough, they would come around. But growth doesn't wait for approval. Your healing is not a group project. Your boundaries are not a debate. People who benefited from your silence will demand explanations. People who respected you will respect your decision, even if it hurts. And here's the shift. You stop measuring your choices by how calm other people feel about them. Because needing agreement keeps you emotionally hostage. It keeps you circling the same conversations with new words and the same outcome. You don't need permission to protect your nervous system. You don't need applause for choosing peace. You don't need validation from people who couldn't meet you with care. Clarity isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It doesn't defend itself. It simply moves. And when you move without asking for permission, people will call it arrogance. But what they're really witnessing is someone who finally trusts themselves. You're allowed to outgrow explanations. You're allowed to choose alignment over approval. You're allowed to let misunderstanding be the cost of self-respect. Distance doesn't mean bitterness. It means you're no longer willing to betray yourself for belonging. And that decision, quiet, firm, unshaken, is what freedom actually looks like. Let's clear something up, because this is where people get confused. Choosing distance doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you stopped sacrificing yourself to prove it. You can care deeply and still walk away. You can hold compassion and still hold the line. You can grieve the loss of connection and refuse to return to harm. Distance often comes with mourning, the version of the relationship you hoped for, the conversations that never happened, the accountability that never came. And that grief is real, but caring doesn't require proximity. Love doesn't demand self-erasure. You didn't choose distance because you didn't feel enough. You chose it because you felt too much, and no one was meeting you there. People mistake your restraint for indifference because they're used to your overextension. They confuse your calm with cruelty because chaos was how they recognized connection. But restraint is not lack of love. It's love with boundaries. You're allowed to miss someone and still know they are not safe for you. You're allowed to hold tenderness without reopening the door. And here's the brave part. You're learning to let grief exist without letting it run the show. Distance is often the most compassionate choice for both of you. It prevents further harm. It stops the cycle. It honors the truth without turning it into a fight. You didn't stop caring. You stopped betraying yourself in the name of care. And that is a profound act of maturity. This is the part that unsettles people the most. You are no longer available in the way you used to be. And that's not a phase. That's growth. They keep reaching for the old version of you, the one who overgave, overexplained, stayed too long, and apologized first. But that version doesn't live here anymore. When you chose distance, you didn't just change a behavior. You changed an identity. You stopped being the person who could be counted on to absorb discomfort. You stopped being the emotional safety net for people unwilling to do their own work. And that shift creates grief, not just for you, but for them. Because people don't just miss you. They miss how you made their lives easier. Your clarity means they have to show up differently or not at all. And not everyone is willing to evolve. So they call you difficult. They call you distant. They call you not the same. They're right. You're no longer accessible through guilt. You're no longer reachable through chaos. You're no longer persuadable through fear of being misunderstood. And here's the truth that anchors you outgrowing old roles is not betrayal. It's survival. You are not required to remain familiar to be worthy of connection. You are allowed to become someone new. Distance didn't harden you. It clarified you. And clarity changes everything. Something surprising happens when you stop explaining yourself. The noise fades. The urgency to be understood loosens its grip. The need to manage other people's emotions slowly releases you. At first, it feels unsettling, like standing without armor. You wonder if silence makes you invisible, if distance makes you easier to forget. But then something steadier takes its place. When you stop explaining, you reclaim energy that was leaking out through justification. You stop rehearsing conversations that never changed anything. You stop negotiating with people who already decided who you were. And that's when your nervous system finally exhales. The people who truly belong in your life don't need footnotes. They don't need arguments. They don't demand emotional contortions to stay connected. They adjust. Everyone else falls away, not dramatically, not cruelly, just naturally. You begin to trust that clarity doesn't require witnesses, that your truth doesn't need a committee. That distance, when chosen consciously, creates room for something better. You're not colder now, you're calmer. And calm people are powerful because they are no longer reactive. They don't chase, they don't beg, they don't over-explain. They choose, and once you experience that kind of self-trust, you don't go back, let this land gently but firmly. They are mad not because you hurt them, but because you refuse to keep hurting yourself. Distance was not your failure. It was your courage showing up without applause. You chose clarity over chaos, peace over performance, self-respect over survival. And yes, that choice cost you people. It always does. But what it gave you back is priceless. Your breath, your nervous system, your sense of self, you didn't disappear. You arrived fully, honestly, finally. The ones who truly love you will meet you where you are now, not where you used to be convenient. Not where you were exhausted, but where you are clear. And the ones who can't let them be mad, their anger is not your responsibility. Their discomfort is not your emergency. Their story about you is not your truth. Distance didn't harden your heart, it protected it. And if this season taught you anything, let it be this: you are not here to be endlessly available. You are here to be whole. Choosing distance was not rejection, it was self-respect. And that is the bravest decision you ever made.